Hello and welcome to another edition of the Bruce and Bob Show. Bob Mueller with News 2, Bruce Dobie, Nashville media entrepreneur, coming to you from Jimmy Kelly's Steakhouse in the heart of downtown Nashville. Going to talk a little politics again. Been a good week for you?
It's been a great week. How you doing?
Doing well. Really
Good.
interesting week nationally with U.S. Senator Bob Corker visiting Trump Tower, flirting a little bit with the possibility of being a VP, coming out and saying he really doesn't think that he's in the running for vice president. I think I agree with him. I don't think he wants any part of that job, but I think it's smart of Corker to be a voice of foreign policy, as an expert in that area. Should Trump win, he's going to need some advice. He doesn't know a lot about foreign policy. And also, if Trump loses, I think this sets Bob Corker up for being the first name out of the box running against Hillary Clinton in 4 years, because I think Bob Corker's kind of done with the Senate. I think he's frustrated by not the inaction of the Senate.
Yeah. I mean, the short history of Bob Corker is he got to the Senate and he was an executive used to moving really, really quickly, and he was upset at the glacial pace of the Senate. But he found his groove, and his groove was in the auto bailout in Detroit. He played an instrumental role in that. Then he jumped into Dodd-Frank, and now he's chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and is so strong. Yes, I think you're right. I think in 4 years he would be a putative and candidate for president. Going to see Trump, smart move, bad move. I mean, at the beginning I was like dumb move. Now I'm saying smart move. But you think smart move?
I think you embrace reality. This guy could win. If he wins, you don't want somebody there with no knowledge of foreign policy. Bob Corker has that knowledge. Why not be the go-to guy?
Yeah.
He's respected by Republicans. He's a centrist, which a lot of those on the fringe don't appreciate, which is what part of the frustration is. But I think it was a smart move for him. He made the advance prior to this meeting. He said he'd never met Trump before. This was the first time he met. So I think it's a smart move by Corker.
Yeah. And of course, similar backgrounds. I mean, here you have Bob Trump, who made a fortune, an absolute fortune, and probably his net worth is probably greater than Trump's net worth. Bob Corker made a fortune in developing shopping centers, and so they probably had that mutuality and could discuss that. Interesting about Corker, he is such a maverick. So
always has been.
Yeah. Makes his own decisions.
Got some issues. Politico this week reporting and confirming an investigation into Bob Corker's personal finances, the FBI, and the Securities and Exchange Commission looking at his personal expenses, personal finances. Corker's people not denying the investigation is going on, the statement only that this was from a fringe group with a bent, not saying who these people are, but that once everything comes out, nothing will be found. And so far, we do know that there has been no wrongdoing found, but the investigation is going on. This is the second time. Money investigation a few years ago, the Wall Street Journal was reporting that he had not reported enough income, eventually had to pay millions of dollars in fines. So there are some questions there financially that I know he doesn't want to have further problems with his revenue, with his participation in politics down the line.
Yeah. Two things about that. One, his net worth is typically listed in the Senate documents as between $1 and $200 million. Anytime you got that much change sitting around, you're going to have an investigation about something, and you are going to make mistakes. But secondly, there's a money manager in Franklin, Tim Pagliara, who has been known to be investigating Corker about a number of things. Pagliara is upset about Corker's stance on Freddie Mae, and because that's the business that Pagliara is in. And he is known to have been investigating a lot of stuff about Bob Corker and is very public about it. Pagliara is also rumored to be considering running against Corker for Senate when Corker is next up. So obviously there's smoke, and I think the fire is coming from down in Franklin with Pagliara.
Interesting in the fact that this is really the first kind of salvo, as it were, or negatives against Bob Corker. He's had some difficulties from the right. Never been a favorite of the Tea Party, but he has been outspoken in his views. He supported some Democratic causes, he supported some Democratic issues, obviously supported some Republican issues, so it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, it will be.
A couple other interesting things that made news this week. The governor made some news by what he did and didn't do. He told me yesterday that next year is going to be the year. Nothing was done this year, but next year is going to be the year where either there's a gas tax increase or some other kind of funding vehicle to help pay for road improvements. Tennessee for years has had a history of great roads. They're starting to crumble. No one wanted to deal with it this year. There wasn't even a bill. It's an election year. The governor said it's not fair for the next governor to inherit these problems, so he's going to take this on head on. What do you think?
Our infrastructure is a disgrace. I came in from the airport last night on I-440. You travel it every day. It is horrible. And back in the McWhorter administration and the Alexander administration, this state was so into the gas tax and building nice roads, and we always got these high ratings from the American Trucking Association and all that. It's time for a gas tax increase. Everybody knows it. Haslam has delayed this. The legislature has delayed it. It's time for a gas tax to rebuild Tennessee.
And the governor made news also by not signing, by letting become law, the allegation that Tennessee then became the first state to sue over the refugee resettlement issue. He had issues with that, but let it become law. He also has let become law the issue where now college and university faculty and staff can carry weapons on campus. He did not like that, but he didn't want to fight it, so it became law. Interesting that, he's opposed this. He did fight and convinced Susan Lynn to withdraw the transgender bathroom bill until next year, and then he also vetoed the or he signed the counseling bill, which allows for discrimination based on a person's beliefs if they refer to another one. So it's a mixed review of these issues from the governor.
It is, but at the same time, you get the sense of a moderate Republican who is just drowning in a lake of far-right Republicans who really are so afraid to see someone from their right running against them that they espouse these things. And so, by and large, he appears weak as a result of all this. He appears whipsawed by the right flank of his party. Not good optics for him.
We have a special guest, Michael Anastasi. He is the Executive Director and Vice President of News for the Tennessean, the new editor. He's been in town since November. Obviously, all the political coverage is of interest to you. Welcome first to Nashville.
Thank you.
For giving us a little bit of time. Tell a little bit about yourself.
As you know, I've been here just coming up on 6 months now, and I'm having a lot of fun. This is a great place for a family, and I have one, and they're here.
From Los Angeles?
From Los Angeles.
Cultural change here?
A little bit, but I was editor in Salt Lake City, Utah for 8 years. It might have been a little tougher had I just come directly from California without that experience. But the states are actually quite similar. In fact, you're just talking about transportation as an example. Utah is often referred to as the most conservative state in the country, and its voting results have borne that out over time. Yet it has one of the strongest infrastructure support mechanisms there, and that is that they have a percentage of the general revenue is allocated strictly for infrastructure support, no matter what, year after year. I believe it's 55% of revenue.
So it's guaranteed it's going to be
It's guaranteed year after year. In fact, in this last legislative session in that state, they were talking about maybe needing to decrease it because they were running out of things to build and a little bit too much money. But that's a good problem to have. And I know that legislators, city leaders here from Nashville, and others have visited Salt Lake City in recent years to see that the work that they've done within a conservative financial standpoint, but driving economic growth. And infrastructure is most definitely a proven driver of economic growth.
How have you found Tennessee politics? It's an interesting blend because it's a conservative legislature with some moderate elected officials and a growing return of the Democratic Party, which basically disappeared for a while. So there's really three different groups here. Do you see any kind of direction? Is it harder to cover? Talk a little bit about coverage that you guys look at from the Tennessean standpoint.
Sure. Well, at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to report what's happening, right? And to represent all points of view. And that's a responsibility that we take very seriously. So that's what we do. I think we have a responsibility to report what's going on and how decisions are made. So we've had a couple stories just this week, for example, reporting on email exchanges between the Republican members of the caucus. And that's important. We need to know how decisions are arrived at. We need to understand the deliberative process. And that's really our commitment to the readership here. In terms of how the state operates, it's interesting just having come from California, which is a Democrat-dominated state. In fact, Democrats had a supermajority there when I started, lost that barely. And the Republicans there in that state are quite a small voice and struggling to influence things as best they can. Yet at the end of the day, the fundamental dynamics of politics play out no matter who's in charge. And I think that's the most interesting thing, just to see those two things contrasted.
You know, Bob and I have worked here for
Long time.
together. I mean, we have combined
Been
about
here
six.
36 years. and
Yeah,
been here-
I've been here around the same time. So we've been here, God, about 70 years together, and still drinking martinis.
Yeah, where's mine?
Yeah, waiter. Tell us, and we've seen editors come and go. So tell us a little bit about, and they all bring their interests and ambitions to the
Sure.
position, and it's a great opportunity you've got. Tell us a little bit about what the Anastasi regime is like, and what you hope to achieve. Regime maybe too. I don't mean
Yeah,
that in a
that's not
negative
a
way.
word I use, but
Era.
yeah, I definitely bring a point of view from the standpoint of news coverage, and I don't mean that in a biased way of covering the news or not, but on the things that we find important.
Sure.
And, the first is a commitment to watchdog and investigative journalism. At the end of the day, we are uniquely positioned. We're the largest news gathering operation in the greater Nashville area. We're also part of a national network, the USA Today network, where we have expertise and colleagues throughout
Nationally,
the
sure.
country to augment the work that we do. When I was in Los Angeles, that was what we were noted for there. We won a Pulitzer Prize in 2015 for our investigative reporting, and that type of commitment to great journalism is where we start. I think where that goes is we make sure that we're serving our readers, and they define what they want. You know, I talk a lot about local journalism of value, and that's not something we decide. It's something that the readers decide. For example, we're launching a big commitment to covering the explosive and dynamic dining scene here in Nashville.
Which is exploding. You're right.
Yes, and I'm really excited about that. On June 1st, we have a big launch party that's happening with a lot of people who live in that space and work in that space. And we're going at that just as hard as we're going at that watchdog investigative reporting, and then just keep multiplying that in a number of content verticals.
Your business and my business, they're all changing and evolving. And there are fewer companies that own television stations, fewer companies that own radio stations, fewer companies that own newspapers. Here in Tennessee, Gannett will now control and own the newspapers in Memphis, Knoxville, and Nashville, three of the biggest cities. You know, in years past, they were independent. They would have reporters covering the legislature from those. Will the voices be less? Will there be only one person from Gannett covering it that would distribute then information to Knoxville and Memphis? Will you still have people from those areas? How are those decisions being made?
So those decisions are going to be made locally, largely. One of the bedrock principles of our company has always been that local decision makers make the local decisions.
Sure.
And that includes the editors in Memphis and Knoxville. That said, the last couple of days I was in Memphis, working with the team there, establishing relationships. As we speak, the editors of Memphis and Knoxville are driving here, and we're having a couple of days of meetings where we're going to talk about ways that make sense,
Sure.
where we can become stronger as a journalism force. The legislature is an example of, in the past, as we had three organizations, we had three reporters, and whatever the big story of the day was, they all three covered it, right? They worked for three different outlets. Now we have the opportunity to take those three reporters and do three stories.
Yeah.
And to broaden our coverage. And there's so many things happening on any given day, as you well know, that will still just scratch the surface. But that's an example of how
Sure.
we're going to serve our readers better.
When you walk into the office every day, do you think print first, web first, or mobile
Or
first?
first.
Yes, that's a great question. I am all about digital. Very much think mobile first.
Mobile first.
Yes, we have a saying, my little saying that I brought with me, which is if it doesn't work on mobile, it doesn't work.
Okay.
And that's our starting point.
Right.
Everything that we talk about, everything that we plan, every decision that we make is through a digital first prism.
Yep.
And then when we're all done with that, we decide what print's going to be. We're committed to having a strong print section to serve our many tens of thousands of subscribers who prefer to receive their news in that fashion, and will continue to do so. In fact, we've made a number of improvements to the print product since I've been here. For example, launching a expanded standalone Sunday opinion section so that we can get more community voices in the conversation each weekend, the day of our largest circulating print product. But most of my time in terms of strategy and audience development is spent digitally.
Local obviously is king. It's why we exist. It's why you exist. It's why people can get information from us that they can't get other places.
Right.
Local is the king. With that in mind, there was a time when years ago when we would all go to the conventions because we just did.
Right.
Those days are really kind of gone. But there's still big events. So how do you guys decide, like, if there's nobody from Tennessee going to be on the ticket, or if Bob Corker suddenly becomes a player, does that make a decision where maybe we go to the convention in Cleveland, or maybe we don't if it doesn't?
Well, let me take you a step back in that we are going to the convention. In fact, we're going in a big way. I have 3 reporters going to the Republican convention, 2 going to the Democrat. And the reason for that was at the time that you have to commit to sending people.
Sure.
It looked like the Republican convention was shaping up to be a bigger
bloodbath.
a bloodbath, yes, and also a bigger local story, right? Because of our demographics and who we voted for. Now the Democratic convention is starting to look like it'll be more interesting, but I'm confident with our 2 reporters there, we'll be fine. Moreover, since we made that decision, we have become one family with Memphis, and they'll also have a reporter there, so that'll add 1 to our number, reporting on behalf of the entire state. And our network, USA Today, we have the largest presence of any news organization in the country. I believe we have about 80
You have quite a team.
something reporters there. Yeah, we have a big team. So we're all in on that, and it's not just going to be what you see in the paper the next morning. It's going to be live, wall-to-wall, gavel-to-gavel coverage on our sites.
Okay, put on your magician's or prediction hat. When's the last print edition of the Tennessean?
I don't think you'll see a last print edition of the Tennessean.
Do you think
there'll
it'll
always be a place for printed newspapers?
I think there'll always be a place, and I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that question.
Right.
First of all, I think it's important to know we have a humongous print circulation, right?
Yeah.
It's still
What do you
very
have,
large.
70 daily?
No, we're over 100,000 subscribers.
Okay.
So we're a metropolitan newspaper in the old school sense, in every way that it's defined. I think that as you look out into the future, you're likely to see newspapers perhaps print fewer days of the week.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to imagine a scenario in which there isn't a Sunday newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
The paper is still the best and most effective method of delivering things to people's doorsteps, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're on the cutting edge of virtual reality work here at the Tennessean. If you haven't had a chance to see some of our VR work, you should. In fact, we did a kind of a welcome to Nashville piece that we posted a couple weeks ago that we're really proud of. That if you're coming from out of town and you're like, what's this place all about? We have a little 3.5-minute journey through Lower Broad and kind of the downtown area for you. Those take 3D glasses, right?
That's pretty cool.
Although you can also view it on your phone and move it around this way, but if you have to have that fully immersive experience, you need those glasses. The cardboard glasses technology exists. It's been utilized. We can distribute those in papers and get them to 100,000 people. No one else can do that.
We've all been doing this a while. To me, this is an exciting time to be in this business,
Absolutely.
even though we've been in this a long time, because podcasts, so many different venues. Do you folks see it that way as well? Do you see?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's so many new venues, so many places that content is king. If you've got content, there's a place for it out there.
Yeah, that is true. And if you have unique content, right, and only we, and not just the Tennessean, but all of us who are journalists serving various platforms in the state, can tell the story of Tennesseans, right? The New York Times could swoop in here and do a big overarching story about the Republican Party's growth, say,
Sure.
in this state or something like that. And it would be a nice read. But they're not going to be able to tell it in the way that someone like you could do, right? With your many years of experience and your contacts and your expertise and the trust that the people you would need to talk to have in you. It's just not going to happen, and no one can supplant that. Last month, the Tennessean set an all-time record for audience, in excess actually of 20 million page views. We're on track to do that again this month. We're reaching more people than we ever have in the history of the Tennessean with our journalism today, and that's what it's all about.
Michael Anastasi, Vice President and Executive News Director at the Tennessean. Appreciate your time and your insight. Come back and see us again.
All right, next time there's going to be a drink for
Yes,
me, though,
right.
right?
Absolutely.
All right, that waiter, where's that waiter?
Bruce Doby, Bob Mueller, that'll do it for another edition of the Bruce and Bob Show. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here next week from Jimmy Kelly's Steakhouse, and you have a great week.